Hi, I'm Norm Miller, founder of the Missouri River Paddlers Group. This is a recording of our first ever Zoom question and answer. We have veteran paddlers answering questions from those who are about to head out down the Missouri River. It was a great turnout last night, and I'd like to thank all those who participated. Unfortunately, because this was my first Zoom conference, the conversation had already begun before I hit the record button. So you will hear the paddlers responding to the question, what is it like to paddle on the lakes? When do I get on and when do I get off the river? So without further ado, enjoy the program.
Midpoint. Once you hit the midpoint, you're basically closing the distance anyway. But it's just kind of watching the weather and kind of, like he said earlier, kind of know that the time of day it starts blowing the worst. But some of that will come with feel, and just be okay paddling in the wind. I didn't hear if you were paddling a canoe or a kayak, but have had some of that experience before you get on one of those big bodies of water.
Hey, Rich,
Great.
yeah, tell them
Great.
about your trip, what you got planned.
I'm expedition kayak Seattle to San Diego, the whole and I've done the Great Loop, all on kayaks. The Missouri River is next, and I'll be coming down with crew in a couple different crafts, and it's going to do it in a unique way, and it'll be a fun trip. It's still working on a little bit of the details, but it's planning on being for next summer. So
cool.
Yeah.
Can I just come in here, Norm?
Yeah, Bob, tell who you are, and you're our longest viewer at 7 a.m. where you're at.
Robert.
It's about 9. It's about 9 in the morning here. I'm in Western Australia. I paddled the Missouri in 2012. I got some great advice from Andy Bew about the boat to take, and I got the Eddie Line Shasta. I done my apprenticeship on Fort Peck Lake. I got into real trouble on there, and that frightened me so much that I couldn't paddle the next day. I made a crossing thinking that it was going to be safe later in the afternoon, and the waves come in from all sides, and I thought I was going to capsize and lose a lot. I knew I'd float to shore eventually, but that was a frightening thing for me. And I think Fort Peck Lake is the worst one. It's got wide crossings. The other lakes seem narrower to me. And as Andy Bew said, I got up early in the morning after that scare, and I watched that water for quite a while to make sure I was confident in crossing. So I'm always pleased to hear somebody's got to the end of Fort Peck Lake.
Yeah, totally agree. I always tell the story about these guys in the 70s or 80s that spent 23 days windbound on Fort Peck, and they ran out of food at about day 17. And at day 23, they said, screw it, we're walking out. And they spent 2 days walking to the highway. They left all their gear and their food, and they never went back, or they didn't have any food, left their gear in their tent and never went back to retrieve anything. So you can get windbound, but that's sort of the exception to the rule. Rich, since you're kind of doing a unique way of descending the river, one of the more unique trips the Missouri River Paddlers Group has had was that of Scott Mesterzat. Scott, if you don't mind telling what you did, and you're actually the first descent of this craft. I think maybe your insight might help or give some input on Rich.
Sure.
Hey, Scott.
Hey.
Hi, Scott.
In 2013, I paddled a 14-foot long Chesapeake light craft stand-up paddleboard that I built out of a kit. And, it's interesting.
Length.
Yeah, I went from Three Forks to St. Louis, took 107 days. The unique thing about a stand-up paddleboard is it's way worse in the wind. It just sucks. And so, I took the strategy on the lakes of going the absolute shortest distance, so like the most risk, but only when I could paddle. I mean, once the wind got over about 10 miles an hour, there wasn't much point. I could only go 1 mile an hour into the wind. So I would wait, Fort Peck was a bit different because it was 6 days of headwind, but it was like 6 days of like a 7 mile an hour headwind. It's tough. The other lakes, I would wait till I get a calm day. And I think that I did like 38 miles on a lake, like 3 different days. So I would just go from the absolute first light until, I think there was one day I paddled till 10:30. There was still a bit of light on, that would have been Wahi because it stays later. And so I took the shortest distance and paddled the longest I possibly could on the days it was good. And then I just didn't paddle the other days, which is kind of nice, especially when you're like a month in and you can take a day and not set up the tent and the tent stays in its own spot. That's not so bad.
All right. Good point.
Norm,
Yep.
Norm.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Norm.
I
Hi,
was
Jim.
I was just going to ask you too, since you had 2 points of views, one of you could talk the other out of not paddling that day, or the other to go for it. What was your strategy when you had another voice to, either talk you out of it or go for it? What was that like?
Well, usually I was the one that wanted to go to shore and wait it out, and Gary was the one that wanted to go for it. So we had to kind of compromise there. We found on windy days that we would be on the water, and then we'd be off the water, and we'd be on the water, and then we'd wait, and we'd get off the water. So a lot depended on the conditions of the moment rather than the conditions of the day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just had to cross around that next point, and then it was fine. And so you really made decisions based on what you could see in front of you. We had weather reports, and as Jim remembers, we went through a time where we had storms just about every late afternoon and evening, and that got a little bit hairy. We found that there were other paddlers coming down at about the same time, and so we kind of had this group where we would check in with each other and tell each other about weather reports and take care of each other. We had a couple of big storms that we came through. One, we knew it was coming, we could see it coming, and so we got off the water early when we saw a place that we could kind of hunker down in a low spot and be safe. The other one we didn't know was coming, and we just happened to have stopped and camped at a boat launch that was right next to a campground. And midnight, all of a sudden, some of the campers came down in their pickup trucks to warn us that there was a huge storm coming. And the one guy gave us the best piece of advice that we could have had. And he said, "You see that cement vault toilet up there on the hill? If I were you, I would run for that and stay there through the storm." So we did. We had maybe 3 minutes before the storm hit. Gary tried to pound a few more stakes into the ground and make sure that the canoe was nice and safe. And then I ran up to the vault toilet and stood there with my headlight on, and Gary, but by the time Gary came, he could barely see me. And we spent the storm, the tornado that came through, in the toilet. We began to love those toilets, and when we thought there was a storm coming, we would look for a boat launch with the toilet so that if we had to use it, we could. So
It's amazing. I wonder how many here have actually weathered a storm in a vault toilet. I have, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that Gary and Linda, I remember you posted, I think it was you guys posted photos the next day. It actually blew like a 25-foot motorhome into the river. So there's a lot of wind there involved. Yeah, you gotta fend for your life and tie your stuff up for sure. Yeah, pretty crazy.
It damaged our tent. We had to get some new parts for our tent and wait a couple of days doing that. But this little community adopted us. I mean, they have posted since then about the campers that were there. And some people took us in 2 o'clock in the morning, took us into their homes, and we spent the night there.
That's great.
Yeah. It was exciting. It was fun looking back on it.
Oh yeah, those are all great memories, aren't they? I see Lisa Pugh's on here. Hi, Lisa. Long time no chat. Can you maybe comment a little bit on weather in the big lakes and what your strategy was? Tell the group when you went and what kind of boat and so forth, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Good to see you, Norm.
Yeah, likewise.
So I went in 2016 with paddle partner Al Kingsley. We were in a 16.5-foot Winona Cascade. I think it was Cascade.
Canoe.
It's a Royal X canoe, tandem canoe. And we did Browers Spring to the Gulf of Mexico. So we did source to sea to the brackish water. And that was May 11, 2016 to November 27, 2016. Yeah, so the storms, I think that was like the biggest thing from the whole trip, 200-day paddle expedition. The storms are what I think stick with me besides the paddling community, because they're no joke. Like those big lakes are just big lakes. But I would say don't get all this advice that I've heard so far is great. And I would say like our experience in 2016, on different lakes was different from what I've heard from 2011, 2019. So like for us, Oahe was brutal. And that's the one that I was like expecting to be really brutal. Fort Peck, I think we cruised across in like 10 days or something. Like we had just like perfect weather. So that one was easy for us, but comparatively, I should say. Actually, I think Lake Sharp and Francis Hale Case, I think that's the other one. And then there's like one more after Oahe. There's like the three big, and then you've got three more. And those were the ones that I think gave us the most hell, actually. We had just like the time of the year, it was the most storms. September, I think was when, late August, September was when we were on those lakes. So I guess the advice there is just like, try not to get in your head about which lake is going to be the hardest or where it's going to like, cause it'll surprise you. And like, you might breeze through something and then something else will come up. So just I think that advice of like taking it moment by moment is really great. Cause we had a lot of that like start and stop too, where you just get on the water and you can paddle for an hour and then you might have to get off for a couple hours, you can get back on. And you really just have to pay attention. Having a weather radio was helpful, I thought. I liked having that tool with us. And I think something that just coming from an institutional background in like my profession of professional expeditioning and leading expeditions with like groups of novice people and kind of having to have sort of a read on a lot of different aspects of risk management and safety and things like that. If you can come up with your own protocol, and I'm happy to like help with this, offline or whatever too, but your own protocol for like lightning, giving yourself like a time parameter of like when you are on or off the water, if you're seeing lightning or hearing it, or like how close the lightning is to you is really helpful. And also like how fast you're traveling. I think somebody said if they were traveling like a mile an hour, it's like not worth it. So like pay attention to like your travel speed. And if you're wasting all your energy fighting waves, like just like call it, don't make that a tough decision. If you kind of like set yourself some limits of like, if the wind is blowing this hard, or if the waves look like this, or if I'm only traveling this speed, I'm not paddling today, or I'm not paddling right now, or just like, it can be a lot of like decision fatigue is like a huge thing out on expeditions. So if you can like take away some of that fatigue by giving yourself parameters that you're always following, I think that's like really helpful.
Good points. Really good points. You got a lot of paddling experience too, Lisa. You spent a lot of time in the Arctic and northern Ontario, Manitoba, leading expeditions for was it Boundary Waters or not Boundary
Outward
Waters?
bound.
Outward
Yeah,
Bound.
in the boundary waters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you experience a lot of crazy weather up there too, unpredictable situations, I would assume. Maybe not as much.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely unpredictable situations and bad weather, but like the reservoirs, the three big ones and the ones after it were some of the worst storms because they just like they can hit you day and after day. But the other thing is like I mean, I like relying on a protocol. That's just like my strategy. It's like, well, I know I'm doing the best I can right now because I'm like, I'm in the safest spot that I can possibly be in right now. And you just kind of like sit back and lean into that. But I think knowing ahead of time, like how to find the best ground, like what are you looking for? Like how do you avoid lightning strikes? And like having that like in your back pocket is really comforting. And then anytime you find a vault toilet or anytime you can get into a vehicle or get into somebody's house, like do that. Don't just like sit in your tent. Like definitely use your river angels if you know a big storm. Like we had tornado warnings or watches, on the trip. And it's like when we had that on the radar, we just like chose to go to the nearest place where we could have like solid shelter.
Good points. I know some people, they'll do those entire lakes and it's glass or it's just calm and it's kind of rare, but it does happen. I think didn't Sean and Cameron, didn't you guys experience some unusual, easy conditions on some of the big lakes?
On Lake Oahe, we had pretty good weather for the most part. We had like one really bad day on Oahe. But besides that, we were putting in pretty good miles every day. I think that besides that, we had pretty average weather, maybe a bit better than average. But there were some windy days and some not so windy days, and we would just, take it moment by moment. If it was windy, we would get off, and the wind died down, we'd get back on. On Francis Case and the smaller lakes, like Lisa had mentioned, those were way harder for us than the bigger lakes, I'd say. Part of that was because our canoe broke on Francis Case, and so we had to switch to a much slower aluminum boat. But besides that, just watch the wind, and we didn't have too much trouble. You want to say anything, Cam?
Yeah. We were booking it on the lakes. Our 17 or 19-foot canoe it went pretty quick, so we could kind of like afford to hop on and off the lakes, and it was like good and a good strategy for us. But I think for you, Rich, you're gonna have to adopt like a much more conservative safety protocol, like kind of like what Lisa was talking about, just because of your slow speed. Probably have to wait a couple days just to like get like a good window to do some of those finger crossings on Fort Peck and stuff. And when the weather is, and you're going to be camping out, you're going to spend so much more time on the river, so you're going to get a lot more bad weather and a lot more of that sort of bad luck kind of condensed into the river miles, but yeah, that's conservative safety.
Yeah,
So
it's being outdoors, it's all part of the fun. It's all part of the experience.
Definitely.
So you guys,
fun is what you get.
one thing I'd like to mention is Sean and Cameron, why you wrecked your boat was you actually hit a submerged tree on one of the reservoirs, right? And that's one thing
on Francis Case.
Go ahead.
On Francis Case, there's like a bunch of groves of submerged trees from when they flooded the valley, and the wind kind of just knocked us into one of these barely submerged trunks, and it just poked a hole right through our fiberglass or Kevlar.
Right.
So something to watch out for sure.
Yeah, I remember in 2004 that was a big surprise because I thought that you would think that when they built those reservoirs they would log the timberland because it's wood and why not use it, but no, they just flood it. And in 2004 it was the lowest the reservoirs were since they built the dams, and there was literally acres and acres and acres of submerged trees that were sticking out of the water. And that's okay if you can see the trees and paddle around or through them, But if they're 1 inch, the top of the tree is 1 inch under the water, and all of a sudden you get waves, you got trees just doing this, the tops just poking out of the water. You don't know when or where a tree's gonna jab out of the water. You'll be going along and you go up a wave and you come down, and all of a sudden the whole top of a tree will submerge out of the water, and you go, holy shit. It's pretty scary. It was a big eye opener for me in 2004. It really caused me to like stop and wait out all storms, because I was solo and I didn't want to deal with any of that crap. It's really scared the hell out of me. But I know the reservoirs are up a lot more, like, 20 feet higher than they were when I did it in 2004. So you're
But even when they're way up, I had that same experience in 2011. It scared the shit out of me.
yeah.
That one day, the waves were like 3 foot, and I was going up and down 3 foot, and all of a sudden I realized I was in the middle of a forest, and it was right there at the water line, and it was scary as hell. And
Yeah, I reckon
I got out to deeper water, but
I recommend a repair kit. I got 2 holes in my board, and I was pretty remote both times, and without this like $7 little epoxy kit and a small piece of fiberglass, I'd be screwed, because it just would totally fill up. So, it's worth carrying.
Okay, let's move along. Next question. Who's got a question they want to talk about? Anyone?
I just want to make one more comment about the weather. Don't think that once you get off the lakes, you're safe. My absolute worst days with wind and storms were on the Missouri and the Mississippi free flowing river, not the lakes.
Yeah.
And so it can be pretty rough sometimes.
That's a great point, Andy. Truly.
Yep. People forget that the Missouri and that Mississippi, that goes right through what's known as Tornado Alley. You got the Dakotas, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska. You get a lot of tornadoes, some really bad weather in there.
Can I make a comment on the? Can I make a comment on
Yeah, go for it.
local knowledge? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I pulled in at Fort Peck campground, and somebody asked me where I was heading, and I told them to St. Louis. And the guy there told me the river doesn't go to St. Louis.
So be careful.
Yeah, you really gotta take.
I thought that Norm Miller, I thought he set me on a wild goose chase. And I went up to the campground and then got hold of Dave Miller's book and made sure that I was on the right river.
You thought
River don't go to Aintree.
I thought they were in collusion with each other. Yeah, he told me the river doesn't go to St. Louis. So unbelievable. He was a local guy.
I had a similar, I did my trip during the Lewis and Clark bicentennial, and I was on Oahe, and these fishermen came up to me on their motorboat and asked me what I was doing. And I said, I'm retracing the Lewis and Clark trail. And they said, I don't think Lewis and Clark came through here. So I guess the point being is you really got to weigh out that information you get from locals, because they're not paddlers. They're not, their scenario is a lot different than ours in a boat, and it's just like
Your weather thing. Remember how you get weather from locals?
Oh yeah, well, one thing I did was too, I didn't have a weather radio, and this is kind of way before technology, way before Facebook and everything. But what I would do is I'd go along during the day and I'd ask everyone I encountered, I'd say, did you hear what the weather's doing? Did you hear what the weather's doing? What's the weather like next couple days? And I would get a different answer from everybody, or somewhere similar. And I would take all those 10 responses I got and weigh out and form my own weather report on what I heard. Like 9 would say it was going to be this, and 4 would say that. I would go, okay, it's probably more like towards what the 9 would say.
Because they're not looking at it.
Yeah, they're not
looking.
Yeah, they're not looking at it in a paddling sense. They're looking at it as,
Picnicking or.
yeah, picnicking and the fact that they can get off and back to the boat ramp in their motorboat in 40 miles an hour and get to the ramp in 10 minutes, what's going to take you 5.5 hours. So it's a totally different scene. You really got to kind of watch out for that. It's all exciting though. All right, next question. How about Bill Burke? You got any questions up there? Good
Hi,
to see you
Norm.
here.
Hi, Norm. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I don't know.
you're on.
I want to thank you for all the resources you've provided us. It's just fantastic. Your website is great, and thank you for this program today. I live in California. I'm 79 years old. I have a 17.5-foot Kevlar C1 clipper canoe. I paddled the Mississippi from source to Gulf in 2019. And I plan to do the Missouri. My plan is to launch probably around May 15, anywhere May 15 or in the next week after that. And I'll probably go all the way to the Gulf again. I did St. Louis to the Gulf on the Mississippi in 19, but I enjoyed it so much, I'll probably do it again. So my question is, what sort of navigation resources are people using on the Missouri? On the Mississippi, I had all the maps, all the written maps. I had a MacBook Pro, which was great because I could see exactly where I was in relation to the river and the towns and what was in the towns. So I'm interested in what written and electronic resources are available. I've read everything on your website, Norm, so I bought the Paddler's Guidebook and all that, but I'm just curious how people navigate on the Missouri. What are the best guides for that?
Yeah, somebody that might be good and that is somebody who recently went, Mark Fingerhut. You're pretty up on the high tech stuff, and you just went a couple years ago.
Or even low tech, Low tech,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, from my perspective in 2019, I brought a Garmin InReach Explorer, and then that paired with an app on my phone called EarthMate. And so I basically just left the Garmin device in a bag. I didn't really have to touch it. But on my phone at any given time, I could pull up the map and see where I was. If I was at a finger in one of the big lakes, I could, kind of deduce navigation from there. And it was a great resource to have. And it didn't require any, connectivity, cell phone connectivity. It was all satellite as well. So, you have to keep those things charged, keep the devices charged, obviously. So carry a couple batteries. And that seemed to work out well for me.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
You know what? When I did it, I called the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
And they gave me they sent me a map for Oahe, Sakakawea,
I have them right there.
Francis Case, Lewis and Clark, but they didn't have a map for the other ones. But I used a atlas for that, especially for Fort Peck and through Montana. There's really no map of the river, but an atlas worked just fine for me.
I'll answer from like a pretty low tech perspective. I just had a GPS that tracked my distance, and I had Dave Miller's book. And so I would figure out where I started the day and then, use the distance traveled, and that's about it. I did get my hands on some sort of paper map for Peck, which was nice because oftentimes to figure out where you are, you're like trying to count the fingers on the lake. So having it this big was good. Could have done it without it. Anytime you're in cell phone range, and this was 8 years ago, I did mine. So a lot of the lower areas, I just looked at where I was on Google Maps. And then again, not something necessary, but I did enjoy having this book. Someone gave to me, Norm has one too. I don't remember where I got it. I think maybe at Cooper's Landing. So I was already well down the Channel I section, but this thing is very detailed.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
I think I take the blame for that one.
Oh, did you give me this?
I think so.
Man, skipping right over you. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it was pretty good because it shows every mile. So if you want to plan out exactly, where you want to stay. It's helpful.
There's definitely a lot of us that are old school or a lot of, with high tech, and it is what it is. I know in 2004 that it just wasn't available online, and the cell phone coverage was only about 10% of the United States. I don't even think I owned a cell phone in 2004 when I did my trip. But I'm way into paper maps. I still don't know how to run a GPS and turn one on. I don't even have one except the one on my phone that I use in cities to find a restaurant. I don't know how to use one really. And I like Jim Emanuel said, incidentally, Jim is paddling the same boat that you're gonna paddle, Bill. Jim paddled a Clipper from Three Forks to St. Louis. But I got all these from the Corps, and I think there's a link on the website, MissouriRiverPaddlers.com, and the map thing. And they sent me one for each lake. And what I did was I literally marked off 5-mile increments on all my maps. I thought it was really helpful. And what I also did was marked off all the Lewis and Clark campsites. I used this guy Martin Plumunden's map. So for example, this is the Bend. And I wrote down, Lewis and Clark's September 30th, 1804 camp. And it's actually underwater now because, the river was flooded. But I use these and they're real detailed. You could see, point to point to point. You could just really hone in on all these. And I really like that. And I had the same maps that Scott had. It's a huge book, but they're all aerial photographs. And you can literally paddle off each map in a half hour because they're like in 3-4 mile increments. But what I liked about them is it showed me like, well, there's a city here. I don't want to camp there, but there's a grove of trees over here. And I know there's no houses over here. So I know that if I camp there, I'm not going to get run off because there's no houses. I use that as sort of a stealth way to find camps because I really didn't want to be on people's property or near cities or whatever. And that's kind of what I use these for. They're all right. They also show all the wing dams. At least I think this one does. Maybe not. It's not as detailed as the Corps of Engineers maps. You can actually go ahead, Rob.
They're aerial photos though, and of course, the river changes from year to year, but
Right.
the basic wing dikes and all those things, they stay there, and it gives you mile by mile,
Yeah.
They're nice.
I also got these maps. They're actually the navigational maps used by the barges. And I was able to purchase them. They're all 800 miles from Sioux City to St. Louis. And they were a two-volume book. Extremely detailed. And I loved it because it literally showed all those black lines along the edge are wing dikes. It showed all 15,000 wing dikes from St. Louis to Kansas City. So I know behind each one, there'd be potential sandbar to camp on or whatever. And I tried to, plan my trip according, but they're way over detailed and, you might not need something like that. I actually feel confident that since I've done the river, I would be happy to do it in a Rand McNally road atlas now and not even worry about seeing anything ahead because I feel like I kind of know what's out there and or whatever. Just not any huge dangers or whatever, I guess. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm curious, on the Mississippi, I found with the Google Maps, it was extremely helpful. I had all the Corps of Engineer and all the other written maps and a couple of other apps, but I found the most helpful thing was Google Maps because it would tell me exactly where I was. If I was worried about whether I got off the river, I could look and see exactly where I was, where the next city is. How much of the Missouri is accessible via Google Maps?
Yep. Oh, I don't know.
I mean, are you able to, like with the Mississippi, almost all of it, I could get on Google Maps and see exactly where I was and where I needed to be, but I don't know about the Missouri.
I can jump in on that one. I scouted the Missouri River out last summer, and I've Google mapped it. I have had a intimate relationship with Google Maps, and you can literally walk every single mile all the way down the Missouri River.
Fantastic.
You can see every dam, every town, every pullout, every marina. 100%.
That's
all the way
really
down.
great to know, because I found that the most helpful on the Mississippi.
You just won't have service for some stretches of the time. I mean, I went down 8 years ago, and there was quite a few days you'd have it on the lake, and then I'd pull off, and once I was on shore under, like a
Right.
hill, it wouldn't work as well. But yeah, you might be able to download it. Do download
Basically,
it ahead of time, so no.
Through Montana, you won't have any cell service from Fort Benton to Fort Peck Dam. After that, almost always you'll have cell service. Once you get past Fort Peck Dam, you have pretty good service most of the way.
That's great to hear. Thank
Bill,
you all. That's very helpful.
Bill, do you have a copy of Dave Miller's book?
The Paddler's Guide?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's one thing you recommended. I bought that right away, and I have that for sure. I was just looking for things to supplement it.
Right. Yeah, I think the technology, I think everyone would agree that it's just in the last few years, it's just accelerated as far as the availability of maps and Google and intel from other rivers. Someone made a comment earlier, I forget who it was, I don't know if it was you, Cameron, or whatever, that there's a whole bunch of you on the river at the same time. It looks like 6 or 7 of you are headed out this spring, which is kind of more than the average that we've had. What has happened in the past is if you don't have to do this, this is just a suggestion, is get a hold of all those others that are going, all those on here, and either friend them on Facebook or either get their text number or whatever. That way, it's been helpful that some paddlers, they'll be ahead of you and they'll say, Dave Miller's book might say, stop at this ramp and there's a great store just up the top. You can get some resupply, but someone may post that, hey, the store burned down last week. Don't stop there kind of scenario. So it's a good way to keep in touch live and up to date. You can't get any better information than the people that are
That's right.
just downstream from you or whatever. It's really helpful. And it's kind of neat to hear that a lot of these paddlers are keeping tabs with one another. It's pretty cool. They eventually meet up sometimes, months later.
Right. How do I know who they are, Norm?
On here, we got Graham Jordison, right? And Gerald Bricker, Josh, how do you say your last name? Bertson.
Doesn't have his mic on.
Ann, are you planning on this year, or is this intel for later? Ann Og.
This is intel for later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
also in that same boat. I'm an intel for later guy.
Where are you, Josh? Was that
Oh,
you,
Josh.
Josh? Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
that's me. I'm Jay from Facebook, if you didn't know.
Okay, got it. Awesome. Thanks for being here. You got any questions?
I'm just happy to hang out with a bunch of like-minded paddlers. I mean, there's never a better time, right?
Oh yeah, that's a good time.
For anybody who doesn't know me, I was on the Mississippi in 19, one of the good flood years. And then Ann, she went the year after me, and it looks like water levels were about 25 to 30 feet lower when she got to
Yeah.
Natchez. So it's
Yep.
pretty amazing to see. I think I could paddle the Mississippi again and have a whole different experience. But the Missouri has always caught my attention. The Yukon would be my ultimate dream river, but it's kind of nice to stay here in the States as much as I can. So I guess the only thing that I kind of look at is I got to get some topographic looks at the area, but it looks like a lot of the dams are kind of in gorges. And so I didn't know if that was an accurate look that I was getting. It's kind of hard to tell from Google Maps sometimes. Just kind of looking at those portages.
Well, were you the
No.
one? wanting to portage all the dams?
I had asked
Was
that,
that-
yeah.
Yeah, Alan Palmer or Lisa, I think, could comment on that because they portaged all the dams rather than, getting a ride around them. You guys want to chime in? Alan, the only really gorge is the 5 dams at Great Falls. I wouldn't call it a gorge, but it is kind of a steep canyon in there.
I mean, they're in River Valley, but as far as being what I'd consider a gorge, not they're definitely set down most of the way below land level, so to speak. But yeah, I don't think it's overly steep to come up. But Norm's right. The only real there is there at Great Falls.
Yeah.
Guys, I've got to sign off.
All right, Bob, thanks for coming in.
Okay.
Good
You
to see you,
stay
Bob.
safe out there, everybody, and we look forward to following your trip. Take care.
Thank you.
One
See
thing
you, Bob.
I do have, if I was donated 2 of these. They're 2 different versions. This is, I think, the newer one I have. Spot locator beacon. This one was donated by Adventure Aaron. And this one has a 1-month prescription free on it. So it'd get you partway down your trip. And Aaron, he was written up in Canoe and Kayak magazine a few years ago. He'd never been in a canoe in his life and went from Three Forks to Miami, Florida. And he departed with $37 in a borrowed canoe with a broken seat. And he made it all the way to Miami, Florida. But he had this, I guess they sponsored him, and he's willing to loan it. I have it now, loan it, each summer to a paddler if they want to use one. I know it's really helpful to have your family, especially concerns family members that might want to know where you're at. These are actually pretty great. And it's actually fun for us paddlers to follow those that have one, because it kind of brings back a lot of memories. We can see where you're at, and it sort of jogs memories of when we went through there. And it reminds, for instance, when Lisa and Al went into Source to Sea, and they were on snowshoes into the Source in early spring, and just painfully watching their trek into 15 feet of snow but I knew exactly
Laughing at
where they
us.
were. So it was really cool to have one of these. And, let me know if you guys want to use one. I actually have 2. So, let me know. I can mail them out to you. You'll just have to pay for the subscription for that 1 month, or for the whole trip, except this one, which is 1 month, which would probably get you through Montana. Anyway, let me know.
Hey, Norm,
Yo,
if I could say something about the Spot, I would recommend everybody have a Spot tracking device. I've used them for my mountaineering
yeah,
over the last 20 years, and I used it on the Mississippi, and it's a fabulous device. You can send 3 or 4 different messages on it via satellite. You don't need any internet connection. You can tell your family where you are, how you're doing. It gives you your exact GPS location whenever you send it, so they know exactly where you are. And then there's emergency beacons that you can use to get help. I think everybody should have one. They're cheap. The annual subscription isn't that much, and it can really save lives.
right.
And if you lose it, Norm will find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I gotta tell this story. I know most of you know Keith up there. As he's been on the group for a while. Keith, I'm still impressed by what Keith did. So Keith decided, every day after work, he would drive over the bridge leaving Dallas, Texas, and look at this little bitty stream going over the Trinity River, and wondered where it went and where he could start and reach that river. And after a year or 2 of planning, Keith decided to start on the Jefferson River, one of the tributaries of the Missouri, and Twin Bridges. And Keith paddled all the way to his home in Dallas, Texas. And so what's amazing is Keith had only been in a canoe 1 hour before. He did a 1 hour canoe lesson, and he never camped in a tent before. So he spent like 185 plus days traveling 4,000 miles down the Jefferson, Missouri, Mississippi, 600 miles up the Red River, and then portaged into the Trinity River and paddled into Dallas, Texas. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked on that. But what was it, Keith? Day 4 or 5, you hit the old railroad bridge by Three Forks and flipped over, losing all your gear. The only thing you didn't lose was your life jacket you were holding and
paddle.
Were you hanging onto your paddle?
No, I lost my paddles. I did recover. There was some like one big bag that was tied into my canoe. So I got the canoe back, and that's about it. Of course, you found half my stuff downstream hours later. But yeah, initially all I recovered was the canoe. Literally one bag was strapped into the, and it wasn't even a waterproof bag. It was an Osprey Atmos 65. So the canoe and that, and that's all that was left.
But in one of the bags, Keith had a inReach locator beacon, which is similar to the Spot, and it was giving off a signal where it was actually his camera bag, which had like $5,000 in camera. It had SLRs and GoPros and movie cameras and solar panels. And when he flipped, and long story short, called me, and I drove over and paddled and tried to find his gear, that inReach beacon was telling where it was submerged. And I was pretty stupid at the time because I was using a phone, and I'm like, there's no cell coverage down there. I don't know how to look at the GPS to find the signal that this thing was giving off. And long story short, 4 months later, I realized, oh my God, a GPS doesn't work off of cell towers. It works off of satellites. So I immediately went down there and found his bag after 4 months. The water had receded on an island, which was submerged when it floated and got hung up. But actually, it had floated probably 25 miles downstream from where he flipped. And I opened up the bag 4 months later, and everything was completely dry. The only thing that didn't work out of all of his camera equipment was the inReach. For some reason, it just quit working, which is bizarre, but it told me where all of his camera equipment was. Anyway, kind of a funny story.
It's a great story.
Yeah. So Rich, did you say you paddled from San Diego to Seattle? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Seattle to San Diego, down the coast. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes. So yeah. So that's like, as they would say in Cobra Kai, that's badass. So that's not real canoe country. I don't think that's the Pacific Ocean. If my geography is accurate. So I think you'll be just fine on these big lakes if you're able to tame the Pacific Ocean. But my only advice to everybody or anybody that would do it is slow down, right? Like, I think now 7 years later, I think back, and I think you get caught up in where am I at, or how many miles have I made, or where do I need to go? But I think in retrospect, I would have taken more time, I think, and slowed down and done a better job of really, not that I didn't enjoy it, because I did, but especially when you get in the lower Missouri River, there's the mile markers there, and you're sitting there and you're looking at the mile markers, and you're looking at how fast you're doing the miles. And honestly, I think that's almost counterproductive. So, when I got to St. Louis, there's a paddler named Mike Clark, and he's an interesting cat. I think we can all agree to that. But he has some sage advice at times, and he says, you really, you're almost done. You got to slow it down, bud. So that's and that still stands with me today. And I think that's important, especially if you're windbound. Bring some books, read a good book, find something you're interested in, and welcome those opportunities.
Yeah. On that note, I don't ever recommend doing the Pacific. It'll kill you. It's not forgiving, and it will kill you quick. But it was a fun experience. But yeah, I definitely learned to go slow. The safety aspects of the Garmin's, the spots, the inReaches, those are all great to have. Highly recommend those. They're great for everybody else that's following along because you'll develop a following going down these rivers, whether you like it or not. It's a good thing, but something definitely recommend as you start getting into busier towns, cities, stuff like that. Definitely on the Mississippi, is carrying a VHF radio, a solid VHF radio, and to have that attached to you, not to your boat or to your float bag or anything, but to you. The inReaches will get you help, but they're going up to satellites, they're going to come back down, and then it takes a little bit to coordinate. And if you're in a dire position, they're amazing. But if you're out in city population with traffic, boat traffic, recreational, barge traffic, a VHF radio, it can save your life. And because the people that are on it quick. And if there are anybody of they take it seriously. They know the rivers are unforgiving, and it doesn't care who you are, and they will take you in a second. And they are trained and they're professional, and they can help save your ass faster than any inReach can. So anybody that's getting into barge traffic, it's highly recommended. And you may not ever use this, and I give this advice for it. I think they're worth their weight in gold. They've saved my life. I'm an avid proponent of them. Just because they may not save your life, you may have the opportunity to save someone else's. If you see a boat go down, someone else drowning, some bad situation, your VHF radio may be your best communication with any dock, marina, boat clubs, recreational boater, or professional boaters that are out on the river. So food for thought for anybody that's going to St. Louis or even going farther. So.
Yeah. Man, and I don't plan on jumping in a whole lot, but I second that wholeheartedly. Going through Baton Rouge all the way down through to New Orleans, which is got to be the busiest stretch of river anywhere. I not only was it very helpful to have the radio, but the pilots were actually very thankful I had the radio, and they absolutely appreciate when you can communicate back to them. And they would call out my position quite often to like Baton Rouge traffic or New Orleans traffic. They'd say, we have a kayaker coming down, give my position and where I'm at on the river. And then I would just simply reach out and say, hey, Captain, just letting you know, I do have a radio with me as well. And sometimes they'd chat with me, but for the most part, they'd say, well, we really appreciate that. And then they would actually also pass that along to the traffic too. And so, yeah, that was always a huge help. And then there is a language on the river with the tows. If you get down to the ocean liners as well, they do have a trucker language all their own, and you'll pick up on it as you hear it, but learning that definitely will help you understand where they're going to be and what they're doing when they get there. So
interesting.
And I'm if anybody ever wants to reach out to me, as Ann will know, I'm more than happy to if I can assist with any of that. I didn't do the Missouri, I did the Mississippi, of course, but any information I can help out with. I know Norm knows how to get a hold of me. So
good comment there. Yeah, that's good. Before I forget, Anne, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Balthazar. I think she did the Mississippi a few years ago, but she was going to be here tonight, but she had a different agenda and wanted me to ask the question to the group, what they did about resupply as far as sending packages, and she was interested in like the post offices that worked best for general delivery. If anyone wants to chime in, I can talk about it too, but let's let somebody else mention and maybe resupply if anyone else sent packages. Didn't Gary and Linda, didn't you guys send packages ahead? Gary, you're on mute. Let's see.
I got it
There you
unmuted.
go.
So can
Hey,
you hear
Gary.
me now?
Yeah, Gary, yep, you're good.
Yeah, we were doing a fundraiser and we were involved with some professional groups. So we knew somebody in Williston, North Dakota. So we stopped there and left about 3 weeks worth of stuff there. And then another one in Bismarck. And so those people were very willing to help us out. It's just because we had those connections. So I don't know if you know some river angels, maybe they'll, because we drove out, so we were able to stash that stuff on our way out to Montana and then pick it up as it came down the river.
And my 2 cents with Ann, I am recording this, by the way. I want to send it. Hope everybody's okay with that. What I did is I did 2-week food drops, and I got on the internet and looked at all the post offices along the river. I'd pick a river town that looked like it was 2 weeks out. And then if you go to the US Postal Service site, there'll be a map of the street map where the post office is located. And I looked for the ones that were the shortest walk from the river inland, because I didn't want to be walking 6 miles through the city to get to a post office. I would look for ones that were a block or 2 or a quarter mile. And that's where I would send my thing. And I would write on it, Norm Miller, general delivery, Chamberlain, South Dakota, zip code. And then in the bottom corner, I wrote river traveler will pick up. And then I had someone send that out prior to me getting there, and I would just go in and pick that resupply up. I do know that the post offices only hold general delivery for 30 days, then they send it back. So that's something you're not going to want to send now, because by the time you get to Pierre or Kansas City or whatever, there's not going to be, they're going to already send it back. So you don't want to run into that situation. I think now with so many river angels in the Dakotas, and especially below Yankton, it's just so easy to send a package to somebody there and they can bring it down to the river. There's so many people in the paddling group that would be willing to help out. And in fact, I'm sure they'd want to meet you anyway, or maybe even paddle with you. So anyway, anyone else have any comments on resupply?
I did sort
For
of
our
like.
resupplies, we just the stores off the river.
Say that again.
For when we needed to resupply, we would just go and into the stores.
Yeah.
You know, if we hit a town on the river, and that worked pretty well for us, we'd get like 2 to 3 weeks worth of food and then get back on the water.
Was there any towns that
and
were
there's
difficult?
usually a town on the Newtown reservation. It was like a 3-mile walk, but it wasn't so bad. Besides that, you know, it was pretty easy just to walk into town and buy some food. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Norm, I wanted to ask, are you going to post this call on your website? Because I wasn't able to take notes on some of the points, and I'd like to listen to it again.
Yeah, this is all new to me. This is the first Zoom I've ever moderated. I hit the record button when I started. I'm hoping it's recording.
Okay.
I want to upload it in the next couple of weeks. I'll post it on the website, and I'll also put a link on the Missouri River Facebook page too. But I can let you know when it pops up.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. I mean, this is great. I'm actually was pretty excited how this has turned out. It's pretty neat to see a lot of people and hear some stories that I've forgotten about or whatever.
Norm, one thing I wanted to second the comment that was made by somebody on this call about moving slow and enjoying the journey. When I did the Mississippi, it took me 120 days. And the reason is I was stopping in all these cities and villages and meeting the people and learning about the history. I spent almost a week in Vicksburg, and on the blog I run for my trips, I wrote about some Civil War history in Vicksburg, and had my family meet me for a week in Memphis and another group of the family in New Orleans. And I'm so glad I moved slow and enjoyed the journey. That's what it's all about.
One comment.
If you're in a hurry, you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah. One comment I've heard, and that was actually from Bob Bellingham, who had to leave early from Perth, Australia. I told him when he did the trip in 2012, I said, take your time in Montana. It's the most beautiful place
Right.
There's a lot of history and just the geology is fascinating. And once you leave Montana, you're not going to see a tree until you get to Kansas City anyway.
Yeah.
And he whipped through it. And at the end of his trip, he said, I really wish I would have listened to your advice and spent more time in Montana.
And Norman, that's why I would suggest, if you can, logistics notwithstanding, to start even a little further upstream than Three Forks, because the Jefferson is phenomenal. Mark, you said you did the Madison, which I'd like to do. I've never done the Madison, but just that whole stretch going through the Rockies is the most spectacular part of the entire journey, really. So the more time you can spend there, you buy yourself a few more days and another river on the Jefferson. So if you can do it, that would be my advice. Andy, I know you started there too, even further upstream as well.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I tell people too, is take your time. I spent 6 months. I wish I'd spent a year. I mean, it's like you can't go back and redo it. So you're doing it one time in your life. Just take your time and really enjoy it. Every single day is special, no matter what the weather's like. It's an experience, and don't rush it.
Yeah.
The exception is if you can con someone into driving you back 300 miles and doing it part of the game. Which, there was some drinking after hours at a YMCA and a coin flip and 300 miles back. So we redid Fort Benton down to Kip, and that was one of the best decisions we made.
Yeah, you're one of the first, or I think you're the only through paddle I know that have done the Missouri breaks twice, Tom. Yeah,
it was well worth it.
Yeah, that's true. Any other questions?
What about the portage around Great Falls? There's some outfitters there?
Oh, we can go extremes on this one.
Talk about.
Yeah.
Is O2 Canoe still doing the portages, Norm?
Yeah.
What's that now?
Is O2 Canoe still doing the portages around Great Falls?
Who's doing them is Jim and Phyllis Mead, that are in the Missouri River Paddlers group. They've been portaging people since like 1974.
Yeah, his license plate says O2 Canoe, right? So I call him O2 Canoe because that's his license plate.
You get a lot of people that want to do it all manually, which is great. It's whatever you want to do. If you want to do the Lewis and Clark and portage around the whole dams, we've had members do that, including Alan Palmer here, that's sitting right next to you there, that's done dam between each dam, which is kind of rare. A lot of people just bypass all 5 dams. Some people go around the dam, paddle. That varies. I got a ride I was coming upstream, actually. I started my trip in St. Louis and went up and then to the Pacific following Lewis and Clark's westward journey. But I got a ride. It didn't matter to me that I was manually portaging around the dams. But so people get rides, and again, there's river angels in Great Falls that can help with hauling you below. We had one member, Mark Brozovich, who unfortunately, I don't know if you read the website recently, he just was involved in a freak accident a month ago and was killed in Japan. That when Mark did the trip, somebody gave him a ride and dropped him at the base of Maroney Dam, which is the last dam at Three Forks. I don't recommend that. Not Three Forks. The last dam at Great Falls. There's some serious whitewater, and there's actually a hole down there I think it's called Big Eddy. That I've heard of stories of it swallowing, $65,000 motorboats down there. And depending on the water level, I know paddlers that have done it and others that portage around. I would recommend avoiding it and putting in at either Carter's Ferry or on the east side called Widow Cooley, which is actually where Lewis and Clark took out.
Tell them what happened to Brozovich.
But Brozovich, some local who didn't know anything about the river dropped him at below Moroni, and he was in an open canoe, and Mark flipped on one of the rapids and took a big long swim and dragged over the rocks, took the skin off his knees and lost toenails and stuff like that. But he got swept, a quarter mile downstream, and some fishermen on the side pulled him out. But he had no idea that scenario, could happen or whatever. So it's up to what you want to do. If you want to say you've done every mile manually, then definitely there's people in the group that can tell you what to do, including Alan Palmer here. I'm trying to think if anyone else here has done. Tom, you guys portage around, didn't you, Bailey? Did you get a ride from? Yeah.
Yeah, we portaged around. We had an old guy who was on a mission, so watched my entire gear shaking around the top of his truck since we only had 2 straps. Bring a pair of straps. That's worth,
Always have extra
Yeah,
straps.
don't trust the locals and their straps either. Or their trailers that they're hauling your stuff in. Oh my God. We could endless. Hey, but Alan, what did you think of your portage? Did you plan that? Did you talk to, was Chris Laurie, didn't he do it before you coming upstream?
Did it after me. So I actually went to high school in Great Falls.
Oh.
So I knew the area. So I had a bit of an advantage there. I used to fish below Moroni. So I knew there were roads, side roads and stuff you could follow along the river. And it was a little bit shorter than going out the highway and then cutting back down to the Moroni Dam Road. It cuts off a few miles, but it's just a tough haul. It's 15 plus miles, no shade, no water. And then you better know what you're doing when you get to the Missouri, because a lot of ledge drops in there and the rocks in there are razor sharp. So if you've got low water, that's really your worst scenario, because there's going to be a lot of exposed rock to rip your boat up. And staying next to shore, isn't always a good idea either, because that's where a lot of exposed rocks are. So you gotta plan that out if you really want to do it. It's not for everybody. Definitely doesn't define your trip necessarily, but you got to decide for yourself and then research and practice, because it's not really a stretch of water that I would encourage a beginner paddler to attempt. And you want something fairly robust on flow coming out of Moroni Dam, something like 10,000 CFS or more. That sweet spot where that covers up the rocks, but yet doesn't create a big whirlpool down there, a big eddy. Yeah, it's all doable. You just gotta plan it out. Yeah, be prepared to one whole day of hauling your boat, across the prairie if you want to do it.
I said that. But yeah, Lisa Pugh, that she's not on, she just got off a few minutes ago. They did it in open canoes, Gerald. They went in, they put in below Moroni, and they have considerable whitewater experience from their Arctic trips, but they didn't have any problems in an open canoe below Moroni. So yeah, it just kind of depends on flows, like Alan said, and your experience or whatever. But the safe place to if you want to avoid all of it, go to Carter's Ferry or Widow Coulee. Play it safe. So, even Lewis and Clark didn't paddle any of that in between there. They spent weeks hauling their shit around that. So anyway, hey, I've never done one of these Zooms before, and I scheduled it for an hour and a half. Does anyone know that if it just turns off at the hour and a half mark? Or will it just go? I'm just wondering, because it's 3 minutes from the time. I don't want to just have it just go blank. Does anyone know?
I think it'll cut you off.
It will. Okay. So maybe we should wind down here. Any last comments from anybody?
Just thank you, Mark, or thank you, Norm.
Oh,
Really
yeah.
appreciate it.
I think we could do this again. I think this should be a regular thing.
I agree.
Get more people involved. I think it's pretty cool. A lot of wealth of knowledge, everybody here with all their different experiences. As a lot of people have said, it's, make it your own trip. It's about what you want, how much information you want, and your experience. You can take much info that we want to dish out or just sit back and find out your own, what happens on your own. You know?
Yeah.
Make it your own.
Norm, I got to rock, but hey,
Yep.
thanks for putting this together, and let's all get together and do it again for sure.
Yep.
Andy, we'll have to hit the red here before too long, bud.
Yeah, I'm ready to hit the Trinity with our wives, our spouse, significant others.
Right.
Hey, Keith. Good to see you, buddy. Andy.
All right, we'll see you.
Yeah, good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Keith, come see us.
Can't wait to see the van again there.
Yep, there you go. Mitch, good to
Thanks,
see you.
everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks a
Good
lot.
luck, guys.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, this has been great,
Be
everybody.
safe, folks.
Love you all. Take care.
Thanks for joining us this evening. For more information on paddling the Missouri River, find us on the web at MissouriRiverPaddlers.com or purchase The Complete Paddler by David Miller, and also on Facebook, Missouri River Paddlers.